Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I will give a sharing about the money laundering and terrorist financing methods and also suspicious transactions reporting. In the coming section, I will first give a brief introduction of the Financial Intelligence and Investigation Bureau, the FIIB, the money laundering and terrorist financing methods as we could observe in recent years in Hong Kong, the key legislations, and in particular, I will focus more on the suspicious transaction reporting system and followed by sharing on some case studies. So to begin, we'll first talk about the FIIB, the Financial Intelligence and Investigation Bureau. With a view to strengthening Hong Kong's anti-money laundering and counter-financing of terrorism capabilities, the FIIB was established in 2021, it is commanded by a chief superintendent and assisted by a senior superintendent. We are divided into three divisions, as you can see on the slides. Firstly, the Financial Investigation Division, which is responsible for money laundering and terrorist financing investigations, and the JFIU, the Joint Financial Intelligence Unit, who process and analyze suspicious transaction reports, exchange financial intelligence with other local and foreign law enforcement agencies, and also maintains close liaison with banks and other stakeholders, for example, the company registry. And at the end, last but not least, the headquarters unit who looks after the AML and CFT policy and legislation matters, conduct strategic analysis and also ongoing territory-wide risk assessment, training, and also outreaching. So, what are the main methods of money laundering and terrorist financing in Hong Kong? Well, before I talked more about the methods, as we could observe, first, let me talk about the definition of money laundering and terrorist financing. Well, according to the FATF definition, money laundering means the processing of those criminal proceeds to disguise their illegal origin. This process is of critical importance as it enables the criminal to enjoy these profits without jeopardizing their sources. Whereas for terrorist financing, it refers to the financing of any terrorist acts and of terrorists and terrorist organizations. So, what are the main methods of money laundering in Hong Kong? Well, firstly, is by committing the predicate offense. For example, like in recent years, I believe all of you would agree that the main crimes that occurred in Hong Kong is deception, all sorts of scams or all sorts of frauds, or like drug offenses, theft, or corruption offenses. These are all the predicate offenses which will bring along those crime process. And the second method is placement, which include the exchange of currency, exchange of denominations, and also cash deposits. The third method, I would say, is layering, which means that to cover the money source, the origin of those crime proceeds by applying different layers like wire transfers, like withdrawal of in cash, or like splitting or merging among different bank accounts. And lastly, integration, like purchase of luxury assets, like purchase of property, financial investment, or engagement in legal business. These are all methods with the same aim to cover the origin of those crime proceeds. Whereas for terrorist financing, it is a little bit similar, but at the same time, a bit different from that of the money laundering. In Hong Kong, one of the methods of terrorist financing, which we could observe in the recent years, is by donation or we could say crowdfunding. The second method is to store those proceeds into the bank accounts or by prepaid cards involving in trading of of cryptocurrencies or or participating in charity, and followed by some inter-account transfer or wire transfer or even purchase of weapons. So about the key legislation governing the money laundering crimes in Hong Kong. Well, here you could see four main legislations governing the money laundering offenses, which Carol have also talked about in her sharing. With the first piece of AML legislation, the Drug Trafficking Recovery of Proceeds Ordinance, the DTROP, implemented in Hong Kong in 1989. The JFIU was thus formed under firstly under the Financial Investigation Division of the Narcotics Bureau of the Hong Kong Police Force as the designated unit of Hong Kong to receive, to analyze, and also to disseminate STRs. And the enactment of the second AML legislation, the Organized and Serious Crimes Ordinance, the OSCO, extended the money laundering offense to cover the proceeds of indictable offenses in Hong Kong and similar conduct worldwide. It further empowered the role of the JFIU to manage the STR regime, which I will talk more about it later in my sharing. And the United Nations Anti-Terrorism Measures Ordinance, the UNIMO, was promulgated in 2002, and it further empowered the JFIU to receive STRs related to terrorist property. Last but not least, the enactment of the Anti-Money Laundering and the Counter-Terrorist Financing Ordinance, the AMLO, codified Hong Kong's preventive measures such as requirements on customers' due diligence and record keeping, which indirectly increased the AML or CFT awareness and thus led to an upsurge in the number of STRs. Talking about the key legislation on or regarding AML, according to DTROP and also according to OSCO, any person who knowingly or having reasonable grounds to believe that any property in whole or in part directly or indirectly represents process of drug trafficking or indictable offense and deals with that property will be liable to the offense with maximum penalty of 5 million Hong Kong dollars fine and 14 years imprisonment. As for the key legislation on terrorist financing, any person shall not provide or collect directly or indirectly any property with the intention that the property be used or knowing that the property will be used in whole or in part to commit one or more terrorist acts. And the maximum penalty is 14 years imprisonment, which is highlighted in UNIMO. Here, this key legislation means the obligation of not only financial institutions, but actually anyone. According to the DTROP, the OSCO, and also UNIMO, any person knows or suspects that any property represents, was used, or is intended to be used in connection with the process of drug trafficking or terrorist property should disclose that knowledge or suspicion to an authorized officer, which is the JFIU. And here, this legislation is like the tipping off of a guideline that Carol just talked about, which refers to that where a person who knows or suspects that a disclosure has been made to the person, then the person shall not disclose to any other person any matter which is likely to prejudice any investigation which might be conducted following that first mentioned disclosure. This is actually the legal basis of our whole STR regime, our STR mechanism. Here, in the chart, it shows the mechanism of our STR, which is actually a public-private partnership. We in this mechanism, there are three units, and you could see from the slide the reporting entities like the financial institutions or the DNFBPs, the JFRU, of course, the Financial Intelligence Unit, and also the law enforcement agencies, which include the police, the customs, and also the ICAC. So how actually it worked? Here, this is the flow chart of how the STR mechanism transform those useful information into useful, valuable evidence. So firstly, whenever a reporting entities, by carrying out their CDD, their KYC, or by their internal controls, gathered information and submit STR to our Financial Intelligence Unit, the JFRU. Upon receiving this STRs, this information, we will further do our analysis and transform this information into useful intelligence. After gathering sufficient intelligence, we then pass this intelligence to those law enforcement agencies to carry on their financial investigations or asset tracing or even conduct restraint or confiscation when required, and turned this raw information into valuable evidence. Here, I would like to give you some figures, some statistics about the number of STRs that we received in the past 5 years. We can see that in 2019, there is around 50,000 STRs were received, and whereas last year, 2023, we already have 97,000 STRs received, and I could say that the number of STRs received at the end of this year will be much higher. So among such a big number of STRs, where are these STRs from? Here is the table that shows the percentage of STR submitted by different sectors. Of course, the major sector that contribute to this high number of STRs is the banks, which include those traditional banks and also those virtual banks, followed by stored value facilities, money service operators, insurance companies, security firms, and money lenders, in which their submission of STRs as received in 2023 accumulated to 0.5% of all STRs that were received by financial institutions. So, whenever you find suspicion or you find information that you think would be useful to JFRU, what you should do? Well, of course, it is to report the STR. Here, this is the website of our JFIU. Firstly, the first option is that you could download an application form on our website and then input all the information that you have in your hand, or I believe some of the institutions have already installed our streams, the suspicious transaction report and management system, which is an online platform that whenever you input the information, that those information will then be passed to us through the platform. Here it is a recommended structure of STR and also that the application form that you could find online. It contains those information that we need, and what you have to do is just to input the information in the appropriate blankets. Like for example, the subject, the reporting entities, and details of the accounts, like the account institutions, the account numbers, or the amount that is involved, or any additional information that you believe would be useful to us. So to submit an STR, what actually should be included in the report? Well, here is a recommended structure of an STR narrative. So firstly, is the triggering factors, which means the reason that aroused your suspicions, why you think this accounts or any accounts or any customers could be liable to could be involving in laundering offenses. For example, any involved crimes like deception, fraud, or corruption, or any other criminal acts that you suspect the customer is committing, or any warrants or any court orders received, any open source information, for example, news or lists of regulatory agencies, etc., or any pattern of suspicious transaction, for example, the amount of loan that he or she applied, or the frequency or the duration between the application of loan or or repaying of loan, etc. Secondly, after the triggering factors, the second information that we recommend you to provide is the background of the subject. If the subject is a person, what is his or her age, the occupation, the income, or any transaction history that you could find, whether his or her age and or occupation tally with the amount of loan that he or she applied or he or she repaid. If that customer or that subject is a company, is a corporate, then what is the date of establishment, any business nature, or any expected transaction amount or expected turnover of that company would all be useful information. Thirdly, the transactions. Well, transactions here to money lenders, institutions, I would say, which means the amount of loans that an individual applies, uh, or or the duration between the application of loan and the repayment of loan, or is there any patterns of borrowing loans that you could observe, uh, like for example, an individual is borrowing loan regularly, like quarterly or even yearly, and any patterns, any special or suspicious patterns that you could observe. Fourthly, the reporting entities, inquiries, and open source information, like any KYC you have conducted or any clarification you have made with that customer. And lastly, conclusion and way forward, like any follow-up actions you have taken, like for example, have you end the business relationship between you, your company, and this individual, or any conclusion or anything you have done following this observation. Here, feedback of STR refers to what we would feedback to you after receiving your submission of STR. Firstly, after your submission of STR, you should receive the acknowledgement of receipt, which means that, okay, we have already received your information. And after that, we will do the analysis and eventually we will give you a result, which is the consent or no consent decision on the amount or on the money that is involved. Apart from these direct feedbacks, you could also refer to our quarterly STR analysis, where we would sum up the figures, quarterly, and also some of our main observations after our analysis. So here, this talks about the licensing of money lenders, which as I believe that Kenny and Carol have already gone through all those guidelines in detail. So I will just pass this slide and continue to talk about the the Hong Kong Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing Risk Assessment Report 2022. Here, this table is the summary of the sectoral threat ratings according to different sectors. Similar to the first HRA, the risk assessment, the second HRA covered data spanning from 2016 to 2020. For the first stage of the second HRA, will cover data from 2016 to 2018. And here, this table summarizes the threat rating in the second HRA as compared with the threat rating in the first HRA. To reflect the latest economic landscape, we have taken into account virtual banks when assessing the sectoral threat of the banking sector, as you could see on the first row. Echoing the comments of the mutual evaluation reports of Hong Kong, we have included the assessment of non-bank credit companies and also standalone financial leasing companies. Also, in line with the updated FedEx standards, virtual currencies is now assessed at VASP as a separate sector in the second HRA. According to the findings on the sectoral threat assessment, here you could find the number of convicted cases and also number of STR that was submitted by the moneylender sector. In here, as we could see from the figures, the number of STRs and also convicted cases is insignificant and also is persistently low. As a result, after all the analysis, the risk level of the moneylender sector vulnerable to money laundering is medium low. However, despite the threat level is low, we should also note the behaviors of consumers over indebtedness. For example, is it caused by the excessive exposure to misleading advertisements or simply the overspending habits of individuals which bring a customer to the required to need to borrow funds, to need to borrow loans from those money lending companies? Or is it about the ease of borrowing, which means that is it too easy to approve the application of any loans? Or was the repaying ability of an individual customer considered? Is there any financial advice given to the borrowing customers, etc.? I believe I would say these are all the factors or concerns that a money lending company could think about when continuing your business or your operation. So lastly, before the end of my presentation, here are two cases that I would like to share with you. uh, and both involve money lending companies. So in this first case, a criminal, or I would say a syndicate, crime syndicate, firstly, it apply a loan from a money lending company, and then and after a period of time, the syndicate repay the loan by crime proceeds. Secondly, in the second case, in this case, it involves a drug dealer who first applied the loan from a money lending company, and after a certain period of time, this borrowed loan was repaid by another person, which after investigation, we know that this third party is actually a drug buyer who bought the drugs from that drug dealer who repaid the loan with crime proceeds. The observations of these two cases is that, firstly, whenever you receive any application of loan, I would recommend you to look into the background of this individual. What is his age or what is his occupation? The amount of the loan or the amount of the repayment, is it tally or is it appropriate after looking into his or her age or his or her occupation. And in this second case, here the loan was repaid by a third party. So whenever you come across cases that involve a third party repaying the debt, repaying the loan, maybe you could make more clarification. For example, the relationship between the borrower and this repayer, or any other circumstances or any other factors that you could observe by conducting the KYC. So here, this is the end of our presentation. If you have any question, please feel free to ask during the Q&A section. Thank you.